I never thought I'd be writing something like this, but I guess betrayal can catch you off guard, no matter how secure you feel. A few weeks ago, my wife, Melissa, started acting differently. She'd met this guy, Brad, at a charity event her company was sponsoring. I didn't think much of it at first, she's always been social, but then she started talking about him. A lot. He's so rich. I mean, that's the only way she described him. Apparently, he's some kind of real estate mogul who owns half the city and can afford luxuries I wouldn't even dream of. Meanwhile, I'm busting my ass to provide for us and our 2 kids, Ethan and Ava. We live a modest, comfortable life, but it's not a yacht-owning life, you know. Last night, everything fell apart. I had to ask her. The signs were too obvious. She was always on her phone, always making excuses to go out, and dressing up like she was going to meet someone important. My gut told me the truth, but I needed to hear it from her. When I confronted her, I asked straight up, "Are you cheating on me?" Melissa didn't even hesitate. She looked me in the eye and said, "Yeah, I am. And you know what? He's richer than you, better than you, and he can give me the life I deserve." My heart sank, but she kept going. "You'll never be able to afford the things he's already promised me. Why should I stay stuck with you when I could be traveling the world living the good life?" I stood there speechless. My wife of 10 years, the mother of my kids, was talking about leaving them too. She didn't want to take Ethan and Ava with her. She said they'd just get in the way of her new life. Her exact words were, "I'm done with all this. You can keep the kids, keep the house. I'm quitting my job, and Brad's taking me to the Maldives next week. You could never afford a trip like that, could you?" I don't know what hit me harder, the betrayal or the fact that she didn't care about the kids at all. After Melissa dropped that bombshell, I stood there frozen. I didn't know what to say. I mean, what do you say when your wife just admitted she doesn't want your kids or your life and is choosing some rich asshole she barely knows? "You're seriously going to walk out on Ethan and Ava?" I asked, hoping there was at least some shred of guilt in her. Melissa just laughed, this cold, almost hysterical laugh. "Oh, please, you act like I'm abandoning them in the streets. You'll do fine. You're a good dad, right? They don't need me." Her voice was sharp, like she couldn't wait to be rid of me and the kids. It was like looking at a completely different person. The woman I married, who used to cry when the kids got sick, now couldn't care less about them. She was already mentally gone, probably halfway to Brad's mansion in her head. "What happened to you?" I asked, my voice shaking. I was trying to understand how she could change so much, so fast. "Oh, come on, I haven't changed," she sneered. "I've just woken up. Why should I be stuck with a life of mediocrity when I could have it all? Brad treats me like a queen. He buys me things, takes me to fancy restaurants, and doesn't make me feel like I'm settling. That's what I've been doing with you, you know? Settling." Her words stung and I felt a rush of anger. "So what? You were pretending this whole time? All those years, the kids, our life, that was just you settling?" She shrugged like it was no big deal. "I mean, it was fine. You're a good guy, don't get me wrong, but let's be real. You're not him. You never will be. I'm not going to waste another second pretending to be happy with you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was like every memory, every moment we had shared meant nothing to her. And the kids, she had just thrown them away without a second thought. "You're leaving them," I repeated, still in shock. "You're leaving your own kids for some guy you met a few weeks ago?" She rolled her eyes. "Stop being so dramatic. You're always so emotional about everything. They'll be fine. Kids adjust, right? And honestly, I'm not cut out to be a mom anymore. I've done my time, it's your turn." It was like she was trying to make it sound reasonable, like leaving her family was just the next step in her life. I couldn't wrap my head around it. How could someone just quit being a mother? "I can't believe this," I muttered, pacing the living room, my mind racing. "You really think Brad's going to stick around once he gets bored of you?" Her face twisted into a smug grin. "Oh, he's not going anywhere. He's already in love with me. And besides, even if he did leave, I'd still be better off than I am now. You don't get it, do you? I've been miserable for years, stuck in this small, boring life. This is my chance to finally be free. I couldn't take it anymore. I felt like I was talking to a stranger. You're delusional, I said, barely keeping my anger in check. You think this is freedom? Abandoning your family for some rich guy? Melissa smirked, picking up her phone. You'll see soon enough. I'm done here. And with that, she turned and walked upstairs, probably to pack her bags for her dream vacation. As I stood there in the silence of our living room, the weight of what just happened crashed down on me. I had to protect the kids. She had made her choice, and now I had to make mine. Divorce. That word echoed in my mind as I picked up my phone to make the first call. I couldn't believe this was happening. My hands were shaking as I dialed the number for the divorce lawyer I'd looked up earlier, half thinking I'd never need it. But here I was, staring at the floor of my living room, trying to process the fact that my wife was upstairs packing her bags to leave us behind like yesterday's trash. The phone rang twice before a calm voice answered, Jackson and Associates, how may I assist you? I need to file for divorce, I said, my voice cracking. It sounded so unreal coming out of my mouth. It felt like I was talking about someone else's life. All right, sir. Let's set up a consultation. What's your name? Mark Townsend. The receptionist took down my details and I was scheduled for the following day. It all felt mechanical, like I was just going through the motions, but inside, I was falling apart. Divorce wasn't something I ever imagined for my family. I wasn't ready for this, but I had no choice. After I hung up the phone, I sat down, staring at the family photos on the wall. One from our last family vacation, Disneyland with the kids just last summer. Melissa looked so happy in that picture, laughing with Ethan on her shoulders and Ava holding her hand. That memory felt like it belonged to a different life now. How did it come to this? Upstairs, I heard her footsteps, and I knew she was still packing. I wanted to go up there and confront her again, make her see sense, but what would be the point? She'd made her decision, and nothing I said was going to change that. The worst part was knowing how this would affect the kids. Ethan was 10, and Ava was only 7. They had no idea their mom was about to walk out of their lives. I couldn't even begin to think of how I'd explain it to them. I heard Melissa coming back down the stairs, her suitcase rolling behind her. She was on the phone with someone, probably Brad. She didn't even acknowledge me as she walked past the living room, laughing into the phone like none of this was happening. You ready, babe? I'll be at the airport soon, she said, her voice dripping with excitement. I clenched my fists, trying to keep my composure. She was leaving right in front of me. No apology, no goodbye to the kids, nothing. As she reached the front door, I couldn't stay silent anymore. You're really doing this? You're leaving without even saying goodbye to your children? Melissa paused, turned, and gave me a cold, dismissive look. I already told you, Mark. I'm done. They'll be fine. You'll figure it out. Then she walked out, closing the door behind her like it was just another normal day. The silence that followed was suffocating. I stood there for a long time, staring at the door, waiting for something to happen, for her to turn around, for this nightmare to end, but nothing changed. She was gone. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't fall apart. The kids needed me, and I had to be strong for them. Melissa had made her choice, but I wasn't going to let her destroy everything. I headed to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and took a deep breath. Tomorrow, I'd meet with the lawyer. But tonight, I had to figure out how to tell Ethan and Ava that their mother wasn't coming back. I stayed in the kitchen for what felt like hours, trying to figure out how I was going to break the news to Ethan and Ava. How do you tell your kids that their mother chose a vacation over them? That she doesn't want to be part of their lives anymore? Finally, I couldn't put it off any longer. I walked upstairs and found them playing quietly in their rooms. Ethan was building something with his Legos, and Ava was drawing a picture, probably another one of her animals. They were so innocent, so unaware of the storm that was about to hit their world. Hey guys, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Can we talk for a minute? They both looked up, sensing something was wrong. I sat down on the edge of Ethan's bed and pulled Ava close, "Where's Mommy?" Ava asked, her eyes wide. I swallowed hard, the words catching in my throat. Mommy. Mommy had to go away for a little while. Ethan frowned, already too smart for his age. Is she on a business trip or something? No, not exactly. I felt the weight of the moment pressing down on me. Mommy decided she needs some time away. She's not coming back for a while. Ava's face scrunched up in confusion. Like a vacation? I hesitated, not wanting to say too much, but knowing I couldn't lie. Something like that. She's going to be away for a while, but you'll be with me, okay? We're going to be just fine. Ethan stared at me, his brows furrowed. Is she coming back at all? I felt a lump in my throat and struggled to answer. I wasn't sure if she was coming back. Even if she did, she'd never be the mother they needed again. I don't know, Ethan. I really don't. Ava crawled onto my lap, her little arms wrapping around me. I miss Mommy already. I know, sweetie, I whispered, hugging her close. I miss her too. Ethan's eyes filled with anger. Did she leave because of us? Did we do something wrong? My heart broke at that question. No. It has nothing to do with you guys. You didn't do anything wrong. This is all on her, okay? She just made a decision, and it's not fair to any of us. The anger in Ethan's face shifted into something that looked like hurt. But why? Why would she leave us? I didn't know how to answer that. I didn't understand it myself. I don't know, buddy. I really don't. But I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. Ava sniffled, burying her face in my chest. I want Mommy to come home. I know you do, I said, stroking her hair. I'm going to do everything I can to make things better for us. We're still a family, okay? The three of us. Ethan didn't say anything else. He just sat there, staring at the floor, trying to make sense of a world that had just been turned upside down. I stayed with them for a while, holding Ava and trying to keep myself together. I could feel the weight of their sadness, their confusion. They didn't deserve any of this. I wanted to shield them from the pain, but there was only so much I could do. After a while, I tucked them into bed. Ava asked if Mommy would call, and I lied, told her maybe. She seemed to find comfort in that and drifted off to sleep, still clutching her stuffed bunny. Ethan, though, stayed awake, staring at the ceiling long after I kissed him goodnight. As I left their room and closed the door softly behind me, I felt the full weight of what had just happened crash down on me. Melissa was gone, and now it was just me and the kids. I headed downstairs, sat on the couch, and for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I let myself break down. The next morning, I woke up on the couch, my face stiff from dried tears. The house felt eerily quiet, even though Ethan and Ava were still asleep upstairs. The weight of everything hit me again, and for a second, I had this crazy hope that maybe it had all been a bad dream, that Melissa hadn't really left us for some rich guy. But reality didn't care about hope. I had to get moving. Today was the day I was meeting with the divorce lawyer, and even though it felt like my life was falling apart, I had to hold it together for the kids. They were depending on me now. I went upstairs to check on them. Ava was curled up in bed, clutching her bunny, still asleep. Ethan was already awake, sitting on the edge of his bed with a blank expression on his face. "Hey, buddy," I said, trying to sound upbeat. "How about some breakfast?" He didn't even look at me. Is she really not coming back? I sighed, sitting down next to him. I don't know, Ethan. Right now it looks like she's not. He nodded slowly, but he didn't say anything. I could see the hurt in his eyes, and it killed me that I couldn't make it better. I ruffled his hair, trying to lighten the mood a little. How about pancakes? Extra syrup? Ethan gave a small nod, and I took that as a win. I went downstairs to make breakfast, trying to keep things as normal as possible, even though nothing about this was normal. I kept glancing at my phone, half expecting Melissa to call or text, but of course there was nothing. By the time Ava woke up, I had the pancakes ready. I poured her a glass of orange juice and tried to ignore the empty chair where Melissa used to sit. It didn't feel real. The kids ate quietly, the air heavy with unspoken questions and confusion. I was doing everything I could to keep it together, but every now and then I caught myself staring off, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. After breakfast, I sat them down. "I have to go out for a bit this morning," I told them, trying to sound casual. "But don't worry, it's nothing bad. I just have to meet with someone to help us figure things out." Ethan, who had been mostly quiet, finally spoke up. "A lawyer?" I blinked. "How did you know?" "I heard you on the phone last night," he said, his voice flat. "You're divorcing Mom, aren't you?" I wasn't sure what to say. I didn't want to lie to him, but I also didn't want to dump everything on his shoulders all at once. "Yeah," I finally said. "I think that's what's going to happen." Ava's face crumpled. "Does that mean we'll never see Mommy again?" I felt like my heart was being ripped out. No, sweetie. I don't know what's going to happen with her, but no matter what, I'm here for you, and we're going to be okay." I wasn't sure if I even believed that myself, but I needed to say it for them. I left them with my neighbor, Mrs. Davis, who had known them since they were babies and promised to keep them busy while I was gone. The drive to the lawyer's office felt like I was marching toward my own execution. My mind kept replaying everything Melissa had said, her words cutting deeper every time. She had left us for some rich jerk she barely knew, and she didn't care about the damage she'd done. She was already on a plane, probably sipping champagne in first class, while I was stuck cleaning up the mess she'd made of our lives. When I got to the office, the lawyer, Mr. Jackson, greeted me with a firm handshake. He had the kind of no-nonsense look that I needed right now, someone who could help me navigate through this storm. We sat down, and he asked me to explain the situation. As I told him everything, Melissa's affair, her walking out, and her complete disregard for the kids, he took notes, nodding occasionally, but saying little. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Well, Mark, this is going to be a tough road, but you're doing the right thing. We'll start the paperwork for divorce, and from what you've told me, we can aim for full custody of the kids. It's clear she's abandoned them." Hearing it put so bluntly made my stomach churn. Abandoned. Melissa had abandoned us. "I just want to make sure the kids are okay," I said, my voice strained. "She's not even thinking about them." Mr. Jackson nodded. "I understand. We'll make sure the courts see that. You focus on taking care of Ethan and Ava. We'll handle the rest." The meeting was over quicker than I expected. As I left the office, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. I was taking control of the situation, but it also felt like the final nail in the coffin of our life as a family. When I got back home, Mrs. Davis had taken the kids to the park. I sat down on the couch and stared at my phone, scrolling through photos, family vacations, birthday parties, Christmas mornings. I couldn't believe how quickly everything had changed. I scrolled to a picture from just a month ago where Melissa was smiling, holding Ava in her arms. I couldn't reconcile that image with the woman who had walked out the door without a second glance. The phone buzzed in my hand, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was a message from Melissa. My heart jumped, thinking for a moment that maybe she had come to her senses. But when I opened it, it was just a short text. "Hope you're explaining things to the kids. I'll be out of the country for a few weeks. Tell them I'll call if I have time." That was it. No apology, no remorse, nothing. I threw the phone down, my hands shaking with anger. Melissa had truly left us behind and she didn't care one bit. This was real. There was no going back. After Melissa's text, something inside me snapped. I sat there on the couch, staring at my phone in disbelief. She was already out of the country, already living her new life, while I was left to pick up the pieces. "I'll call if I have time." That's all she had to say about leaving her children behind. The coldness of it hit me like a punch to the gut. I spent the rest of the afternoon in a haze. Ethan and Ava came back from the park, happy and laughing, their little faces lighting up the house. I plastered on a smile, trying my best to seem normal, but inside I was still reeling. How was I supposed to explain Melissa's absence to them long term? How was I supposed to navigate this? I gave them an early dinner and let them watch TV while I tried to calm myself down. I'd always been the steady one, the rock in our family, but now it felt like I was floating in the middle of an ocean, no land in sight. The weight of responsibility pressed down on me hard. Melissa was gone, and I had to accept it. I was alone in this. As the night went on, I tried to figure out what my next move was. The meeting with the lawyer had been a good start, but it was just the beginning of a long, messy road. I couldn't even begin to think about what court might look like or how I'd manage the kids through all of this. But I knew one thing for sure. I had to be strong for them. They didn't deserve any of this, and I wasn't going to let Melissa's selfishness wreck their lives. Later that evening, as I was tucking Ava into bed, she looked up at me with her big, innocent eyes. "Daddy, is Mommy going to be gone forever?" My heart ached at the question. I knelt beside her bed, brushing the hair out of her face. "I don't know, sweetheart, but no matter what, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." She nodded slowly, but I could see the confusion in her eyes. How could she understand something like this? She was only 7. I kissed her on the forehead, trying to push back the overwhelming emotions bubbling up inside me. Once the kids were asleep, I sat back down on the couch and stared at my phone again. No new messages. Melissa had left me hanging, left all of us hanging, and now I had to figure out how to navigate a world where she just didn't exist anymore. I debated texting her back, asking if she even cared about Ethan and Ava. But what good would it do? She was gone, and she wasn't coming back anytime soon. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I called my brother, Dan. Dan had always been my go-to for advice, even if we hadn't spoken much lately. He picked up after a few rings, sounding surprised to hear from me. "Mark, what's going on, man? It's been a while." I took a deep breath, trying to hold it together. "Dan, I need to talk. It's about Melissa." "What's up? Is everything okay?" His tone shifted immediately, sensing something serious. "She's gone. She left us." There was a pause on the other end. "What do you mean she left? Like, for good?" "Yeah," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "She met some rich guy, left me and the kids to be with him. She's on a plane somewhere right now, probably on her way to some tropical vacation." "Holy shit, Mark," Dan said, clearly stunned. "Are you serious? Just like that?" "Just like that." I could feel the anger rising again, the bitterness creeping in. She didn't even care about the kids. She just left. Dan was quiet for a moment, letting it sink in. "Man, I don't even know what to say. That's messed up on so many levels. How are you holding up?" "I'm managing. I met with a lawyer today. I'm filing for divorce. I just don't know how I'm supposed to explain all this to Ethan and Ava." "You shouldn't have to do this alone," Dan said, his voice full of concern. "Why don't you bring the kids down to my place this weekend? Let's talk more in person. You shouldn't be carrying all of this by yourself." His offer hit me hard. I hadn't realized just how alone I felt until he said that. "Yeah," I muttered, feeling a wave of relief. That might be good. I could use a break." "Bring them down, man," Dan insisted. "We'll figure it out together. And screw Melissa. If she's selfish enough to walk out like that, she doesn't deserve any of you." Hearing him say that, hearing someone else validate what I was feeling, helped more than I thought it would. After I hung up, I felt a little lighter. I wasn't completely alone in this. I went to bed that night with a plan. First, get through the next few days. Then, pack up the kids and head to Dan's. Maybe getting away for a bit would help clear my head, give me the strength I needed to face whatever came next. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I kept replaying the moment Melissa walked out the door, how she didn't even look back, how she'd said she'd call if she had time. For the first time since this whole mess started, I realized something. I didn't want her back. I wanted my family back, but not her. She wasn't the woman I thought she was anymore. She wasn't the woman I fell in love with. And maybe, just maybe, I'd be better off without her. The next few days passed in a strange blur. I managed to get through work, get the kids off to school, and maintain some level of normalcy at home, but it felt like I was going through the motions. Melissa was still on my mind constantly, even though I was trying my best to focus on Ethan and Ava. They were handling things better than I expected, at least on the surface. Ava kept asking when Mommy would call, and I kept giving her vague answers, telling her I wasn't sure. Ethan, on the other hand, was more withdrawn. He didn't say much, but I could see the questions in his eyes, the anger he was trying to hide. It was Friday afternoon when I packed the kids into the car and headed to my brother Dan's place. The drive was about an hour, but it gave me some time to think, to get my head straight before I had to face more questions from the kids. They didn't know yet that I had filed for divorce. I wasn't ready to hit them with that, not until I had some kind of plan in place. As we pulled up to Dan's house, he came out to greet us, a big smile on his face. Dan had always been the strong, dependable one in the family. He was 5 years older, had a wife and 3 kids of his own, and always seemed to have his life together. Seeing him now, waving as if everything was perfectly normal, almost made me break down again. I realized just how much I had been holding in. "Hey, there's my favorite nephew and niece." Dan grinned as he opened the car door for the kids. "Come on in, we've got burgers on the grill." Ethan managed a small smile, and Ava ran over to give Dan a hug. She loved coming here, always treated like royalty by her cousins. For a moment, it was like the storm cloud hanging over us cleared, and the kids were just kids again, excited to see their cousins and play. Dan motioned for me to follow him inside, and as soon as we stepped into the kitchen, he handed me a beer and raised his eyebrows. "How are you holding up, man?" I took a long swig, letting the cold beer steady me. "Honestly, I'm still trying to figure out how the hell all this happened. One day we were fine, and the next she's gone. I don't know how to explain it to the kids. I don't even know how to explain it to myself." Dan leaned back against the counter, crossing his arms. "I don't think you can explain something like that. There's no logic to it. People just, sometimes they're selfish. Sounds like Melissa lost sight of what matters." I nodded, staring at the floor. "I filed for divorce. The lawyer says I should get full custody since she's basically abandoned the kids, but I'm dreading what comes next. The legal battles, the court stuff. I don't want the kids to go through that." Dan's face hardened. "You do what you have to do to protect them. That's all that matters now. Melissa made her choice. Now, you've got to make yours." "Yeah, I know." I sighed, feeling the weight of it all. "It's just, I never thought I'd be here. I thought we were happy." Dan gave me a sympathetic look. "We all think that until something like this happens. But Mark, you're stronger than you think. You'll get through this, and so will the kids." I nodded, though I wasn't sure if I believed it yet. I knew I had no choice. Ethan and Ava were depending on me, and no matter how hard this got, I couldn't fall apart, not in front of them. We went out to the backyard, where the kids were playing with Dan's 3 boys. For a few hours, it was almost like everything was normal again. Burgers on the grill, kids running around laughing, and for the first time in days, I felt a sense of peace. I sat on the porch with Dan, watching the kids, and for a brief moment I let myself enjoy the calm. But it didn't last long. Later that evening, after we got the kids settled with a movie, Dan and I sat down in the living room. I could tell he had something on his mind, and after a few minutes he finally spoke up. "So Melissa hasn't reached out at all?" he asked, his voice low. "No," I said, shaking my head. "Not since that one text. I'll call if I have time." "Can you believe that?" Dan's face darkened. "Unbelievable. I hate to say this, but it's probably better that she stays away, at least for now. She's not thinking straight, and the kids don't need more confusion." "I know," I muttered, "but I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, like she's going to pop back up and demand custody or something just to mess with me." Dan looked thoughtful. "You should prepare for that. Even if she doesn't want the kids, she could pull something just to cause drama. People do crazy things when they're backed into a corner. I hadn't even thought of that, but it made sense. Melissa was unpredictable now. The woman I'd married was gone, replaced by someone who seemed to care about nothing but herself. If she wanted to, she could come back just to make things harder on me, on the kids. I felt my stomach twist at the thought. What do I do if she tries? Dan shrugged. Keep doing what you're doing, document everything, get the lawyer ready, but most of all, don't let her get to you. She's already made her choice, and if she tries to change her mind just to mess with you, you've got to stay focused on what matters. He was right. Melissa had already hurt me enough, but I couldn't let her destroy everything. My priority now was the kids. I had to keep them safe, no matter what. That night, after the kids were asleep, I lay in bed in Dan's guest room, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in days, I felt a small flicker of resolve. Melissa might try to throw more chaos our way, but I wasn't going to let her win. I had Ethan and Ava, and I wasn't going to let them down. I was stronger than I thought, strong enough to face whatever came next. The weekend with Dan was just what I needed. It gave me time to think, to regroup, and to start making plans for the future. I had to admit, being surrounded by family helped. The kids laughed with their cousins, and for a moment, I felt like things might just be okay. But when we got back home Sunday evening, reality hit me all over again. I walked into the house, and the emptiness was suffocating. Melissa's things were still scattered around, the remnants of her old life that she left behind without a second thought. The scent of her perfume still faintly lingered in the bedroom, and it made me sick. I opened the windows, trying to air it out, but the knot in my chest stayed. I started thinking about how much of her was still here, physically. Her clothes were still in the closet, her jewelry on the dresser, her favorite coffee mug in the kitchen. It was like she had left everything behind, except her conscience. Ethan and Ava went upstairs to their rooms, probably trying to slip back into their routine, but I could see it on their faces. They were struggling to understand what was happening. Hell, I didn't even fully understand it. All I knew was that Melissa was gone, and now it was up to me to clean up the mess. As I was unpacking, my phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced down and froze. It was a text from Melissa. Melissa, we need to talk. I stared at the message, my heart racing. What the hell did she want now? She had made it clear she didn't care about us, so why reach out now? For a few minutes, I debated whether or not to even respond. Part of me wanted to ignore her, let her sit there wondering if I'd ever answer, but the other part, the part that still needed closure, couldn't resist. Me. What do you want, Melissa? Her reply came almost instantly. Melissa, I want to talk about the kids and the house. I felt my blood pressure spike. The house? The same house she abandoned, along with the kids? Now she wanted to talk about it? I slammed my phone down on the counter, pacing the kitchen as anger bubbled up inside me. She walked out. She didn't get to make demands anymore. But before I could think better of it, I picked up the phone and texted her back. Me. You left. You don't get a say in anything anymore. I'm filing for divorce. We'll settle everything in court. Her next reply was like gasoline on the fire. Melissa. I'm still their mother, Mark, and I want what's mine. What's mine? The words echoed in my head. The audacity of it, after everything she had done, was almost too much to handle. I had half a mind to call her right then and there, to scream at her for everything, but I knew that wouldn't solve anything. She wasn't the same person anymore. Trying to reason with her would be like shouting into a void. Instead, I called my lawyer, Jackson. It was after hours, but I left him a message explaining the situation. I needed to know what rights Melissa had left, if any, after abandoning the kids like that. The rest of the night, I couldn't focus on anything else. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, trying to figure out what angle she was playing. Did she really care about the kids, or was she just trying to stir up drama? And the house? Why did she even care? She hadn't shown any interest in it before she left. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined Melissa coming back, trying to worm her way back into the kids' lives, only to leave again once she got what she wanted. I couldn't let that happen. I wouldn't let her mess with Ethan and Ava's heads like that. The next morning, as I was getting the kids ready for school, my phone buzzed again. It was Jackson, calling me back. "Mark, I got your message," he said, his voice steady. "I know this is a difficult situation, but we need to be prepared. Melissa might try to come back into the picture, especially if she thinks she's entitled to anything, whether it's custody or the house." I felt my stomach twist. "She doesn't want the kids, Jackson. She made that clear when she walked out. She doesn't even care about them." Be that as it may, the courts tend to favor mothers in custody battles, even when the circumstances are complicated. If she decides she wants joint custody, we need to be ready to fight. The word fight hit me like a punch to the gut. I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready to stand in a courtroom and argue over who gets the kids, especially not with Melissa, who had proven over and over again that she wasn't fit to be a mother anymore. "And the house?" I asked, my voice tight. "She's talking about wanting the house." Jackson paused. "That's a tricky one. If the house is in both your names, she might have a claim to it, even if she's not living there. But again, we'll argue that she abandoned the family. It won't be an easy fight, but you're doing the right thing by documenting everything." I rubbed my temples, feeling the weight of it all crushing down on me. "I just want to keep my kids safe, Jackson. I don't care about the house. I just don't want her to have any more power over them." "We'll fight for full custody," Jackson assured me. "But Mark, you need to be prepared for a long road ahead. This isn't going to be resolved overnight." I thanked him and hung up, feeling even more drained than before. I knew this wasn't going to be easy, but hearing Jackson lay it out so bluntly made it feel all the more real. Melissa wasn't going to just disappear. She might have left physically, but she was still trying to control things from a distance, and I had to be ready for whatever game she was playing. When the kids got home from school that afternoon, I sat them down and tried to explain things the best I could. "Mommy might call soon," I said carefully, watching their reactions. "She wants to talk about a few things." Ava's eyes lit up. "She's coming back?" I swallowed hard, trying not to let my emotions show. "I don't think so, sweetie, but she might want to talk to you guys on the phone. Just be ready." Ethan said nothing, his face set in stone. I could see the pain behind his eyes, but he was trying to be strong. And just like that, the calm I had felt over the weekend was gone. The storm was coming back, and this time, I had no idea how to stop it. That evening, after putting Ethan and Ava to bed, I sat in the living room, staring at my phone. I knew it was only a matter of time before Melissa called. She had been quiet all day, which only made me more anxious. The kids had asked about her a couple of times, especially Ava, but I could tell that even they were starting to sense that something had changed. Ethan, as usual, stayed silent, but I could see the confusion and anger simmering beneath the surface. As I sat there, trying to focus on the TV but barely paying attention, my phone buzzed. Melissa's name popped up on the screen, and for a second I hesitated. I didn't want to talk to her, not after everything, but I knew I had to, at least to protect the kids. I took a deep breath and answered. "Mark," her voice came through, sounding casual, almost too casual, like this was just another day. "What do you want, Melissa?" I asked, my tone sharper than I intended. There was a pause on the other end, and then she sighed. "Look, I know you're mad, I get it, but I want to talk about the kids." "The kids?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You mean the ones you walked out on?" She ignored the jab. "I've been thinking, maybe I made a mistake." I felt my blood run cold. "A mistake?" "Yeah, I've been thinking about it a lot, and I want to talk about custody." I nearly dropped the phone. Custody. The woman who had abandoned her family, who said she didn't want the kids, was now talking about custody. "You've got to be kidding me," I said, my voice low, barely containing the anger that was bubbling up inside. "You left, Melissa. You told me you didn't want the kids. You told me you were done." "I know what I said," she replied, sounding defensive. "But things change, Mark. I've had time to think." time to think? While you were on vacation with your rich boyfriend? Is that when you had time to think? The sarcasm dripped from my words, but I didn't care. I was done playing nice. She didn't respond for a moment, and I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. I know I messed up, okay? But I'm still their mother, and I want to be part of their lives. My hands tightened around the phone. You don't get to walk out and then come back whenever it's convenient for you, Melissa. They're not toys you can pick up and put down when you feel like it. I'm not trying to do that, she snapped, her voice rising. I'm trying to fix things. Fix things? I laughed bitterly. You can't just fix this. You walked out on them, Melissa. You left them. Ava asks about you every night. Ethan barely says a word anymore. You think you can just waltz back in and everything will be fine? She fell silent again, and I could tell my words had hit a nerve. But instead of backing down, she doubled down. Look, we need to talk about custody. I'm not saying I want full custody, but I want to see my kids. I deserve that. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The woman who had shown no interest in the kids for weeks was now talking about what she deserved. You don't deserve anything, I shot back. You left us, Melissa. You abandoned your family. You don't just get to show up and demand time with the kids because you suddenly feel guilty. It's not about guilt, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I'm still their mother. You're the one who chose to stop being their mother. She didn't say anything for a long moment, and for a second, I thought maybe she had hung up. But then she spoke again, her voice quieter, more controlled. I'm not asking for a fight, Mark. I just want to talk. Maybe we can come to an agreement, something that's best for the kids. I let out a long, frustrated breath. I wanted to hang up, to end this conversation right then and there. But I knew I couldn't. Not yet. You think what's best for the kids is you showing up out of nowhere after weeks of silence? I didn't plan on it being like this, she said, sounding defensive again. I needed space. I needed time to figure things out. And what did you figure out exactly? That your new life wasn't as perfect as you thought? Don't do that, she said sharply. Don't turn this into some cheap shot at Brad. I don't care about Brad, I said through gritted teeth. I care about Ethan and Ava, and you clearly don't. There was another pause, and then Melissa's voice softened. I do care about them, Mark. I've made mistakes, but I want to fix them. I want to be part of their lives. I felt the anger boiling up again. She was talking like this was some kind of misunderstanding, like she hadn't walked out on us, like she hadn't abandoned her family for some rich guy she barely knew. You don't get to just fix this, Melissa, I said, my voice strained. You broke it, and you're going to have to live with that. She didn't respond, and for a moment, there was silence on the line. I could hear her breathing, could almost picture her sitting there, trying to figure out what to say next. But I wasn't going to wait for her to come up with some excuse. I'm filing for full custody, I said finally. You can take it to court if you want, but I'm not letting you waltz back into their lives whenever it's convenient for you. Full custody? She repeated, her voice rising again. Are you serious? You're going to try to take my kids away from me? You already walked away from them, I shot back. This is just making it official. There was a long pause, and I could hear her breathing quicken. Mark, don't do this, please. I'm trying to make things right. You should have thought about that before you left, I said, my voice cold. You made your choice, Melissa. Now you have to live with it. I hung up before she could say anything else. My heart was pounding, my hands shaking as I set the phone down on the table. The conversation had gone exactly how I thought it would. Nowhere. She didn't get it. She didn't understand the damage she had done, and she probably never would. As I sat there in the silence of the house, the weight of it all hit me again. Melissa wasn't going to go away quietly. This was just the beginning of a long, ugly fight, and I had to be ready for it. I glanced at the staircase where the kids were fast asleep, unaware of the battle that was brewing. I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let Melissa waltz back into their lives and rip apart what was left of our family. I was in this fight for them, and I was ready for whatever came next. The days after that phone call were tense. I didn't hear from Melissa again, but the damage was done. She had made it clear she wasn't going to just disappear, and the thought of her coming back into the kids' lives after everything she'd done made my stomach turn. I called Jackson, my lawyer, and told him what had happened. "We'll push for full custody," he said, his voice firm. "We have everything we need to prove she abandoned the family. But Mark, be prepared for a fight. If she's serious about coming back into the picture, this could drag out." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "I don't want the kids to go through more than they have to. I want to protect them." "And you will," Jackson reassured me. "You're doing the right thing." But the weight of it still pressed down on me. Every day I saw the toll it was taking on Ethan and Ava. Ava had started drawing pictures of our family again, but now they were missing one person. And Ethan, he barely spoke anymore. It was like he was waiting for something, like he didn't trust the world anymore. Then it happened. One evening, as I was cleaning up after dinner, I heard a knock at the door. I froze, staring at the door for a moment before wiping my hands on a towel and heading over. I half expected it to be Melissa, showing up unannounced, ready to stir things up again. But when I opened the door, it wasn't her. It was Brad. He stood there, dressed in an expensive suit, his expression unreadable. "Mark," he said, his voice calm. "Can we talk?" I felt my blood boil at the sight of him. This was the man Melissa had left us for, the man who had stolen my family. But I kept my composure, gripping the door tightly. "What the hell are you doing here?" "I came to talk about Melissa," he said, glancing behind me as if expecting to see her inside. "Can I come in?" "No," I snapped. "You've already done enough damage. Say whatever you have to say and leave." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck like he was preparing himself. "Look, I don't want to make this harder than it already is, but I thought you should know. Melissa and I are done. She's not coming back." I blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "She's leaving," Brad continued. "I don't know where she's going, but she said she needs time alone, away from everyone, including me." I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. Melissa was leaving him now, after everything? "So, what does this mean?" I asked, my voice tense. "It means she's not going to fight you for custody," Brad said. "She doesn't want the house. She doesn't want anything. She just wants out." I felt a strange mixture of relief and disbelief. "She's giving up?" He nodded. "She knows she messed up, Mark. She told me she couldn't live with the guilt anymore, so she's letting go of everything." I stood there for a long moment, the weight of his words settling in. After all the chaos, after all the threats and the phone calls, Melissa was walking away. For good. "She told me to tell you that she's sorry," Brad added, looking uncomfortable. "For everything." I couldn't bring myself to respond to that. Sorry? That didn't even begin to cover the damage she had done. But it didn't matter now. She was gone, and the nightmare was finally over. "Is that all?" I asked, my voice cold. Brad nodded. "Yeah, that's it." I closed the door without another word, shutting him out. For a moment I just stood there staring at the wood grain of the door, trying to process what had just happened. Melissa was gone. There would be no court battle, no fight for custody. She had given up everything and disappeared. When I finally turned around, I felt the weight lift off my shoulders. It was over. The next morning, I called Jackson and told him what had happened. He sounded surprised, but also relieved. "That's the best outcome you could hope for," he said. "No fight, no drawn-out legal battle. You can move on." And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like I could. That night, as I tucked the kids into bed, Ava looked up at me with her big, curious eyes. "Daddy, when is Mommy coming home?" I sat down beside her, my heart aching at the question. I knew it was time to be honest. No more half-truths or vague answers. "Mommy isn't coming home, sweetie," I said gently. "She's decided to go away for a long time." Ava's face scrunched up, her little hands clutching her stuffed bunny. Is she coming back ever? I shook my head slowly, trying to hold back the lump in my throat. I don't think so, Ava, but you still have me and I'm not going anywhere. I promise she didn't say anything after that, just nodded and curled up under the covers. I kissed her goodnight, then moved over to Ethan's bed. He was staring at the ceiling, his hands folded across his chest. I sat down beside him, waiting for him to say something. After a long moment, he spoke. She's really gone, huh? Yeah, she is, I said quietly. I know it's hard, Ethan, but we're going to be okay. We're still a family. He didn't respond at first, but then he looked at me, his eyes filled with a mix of sadness and something else, maybe understanding. I know, Dad, I know. I kissed him goodnight too, then walked out of their room, closing the door softly behind me. I stood there in the hallway, the silence of the house wrapping around me like a blanket. It was over. Melissa was gone, and our lives were never going to be the same. But as I stood there, I realized something. We were going to be okay. Maybe even better than okay. The future was uncertain, and there would be challenges ahead, but I wasn't alone. I had Ethan and Ava, and for them, I would keep moving forward. I took a deep breath and headed downstairs, a sense of peace finally settling over me. The storm had passed, and the road ahead was mine to walk. And this time, I wasn't afraid.